Welcome to the iLearn Virtual Campus. Please sign up for a free iLearn membership on our website, check out our 7th annual conference coming next spring 2021, and let us know if you're interested in hosting events or leasing space on our campus by emailing campus@immersivelrn.org.
interface design. So we first enumerated the design requirements for this kind of interface. A lot of them are straightforward: low translation error, low rotation error, short alignment time. These are relatively obvious. We also want to minimize the visual clutter, especially because the field of view of these headsets is relatively small. But the main focus of our work was low physical strain. Now that's hard to quantify directly. So what we did was we focused on specific high exertion body poses that we wanted to avoid having the user assume. So we wanted to keep the arm close to the body. So we didn't want the user to stretch out the arm really far. If you've ever heard the term gorilla arm, that's where you stretch out the arm for long periods of time and the arm is very fatigued and tired. We also wanted to have low levels of head pitch. So we didn't want the head to be tilted up or down very much because you have some additional weight of the headset, and that weight distribution is off. That will cause additional fatigue on the neck. We also wanted to avoid lining up the head relative to the handheld object. So what I mean by that is, if you're trying to place a handheld object into different poses and you find that you're having to line yourself up behind the pose, then you're having to move your own body. Whereas if you can just adjust everything without having to have the same relative pose of your head to the object, then it's going to be a lot less fatiguing. So with these design requirements, we ended up implementing several interfaces to test based off of these varying levels of interface redundancy and varying types of alignment strategies. So I'll talk about those now. So since we were just focused on the general task of alignment, we ended up testing everything on a prototype system that used a Microsoft HoloLens 1 and an HTC Vive. We wirelessly linked them together to share the same coordinate system. So first, this is the simple case of an XYZ axis. This represents a moderate amount of visualization redundancy. It presents both rotation and translation guidance simultaneously to the user. We also defined two different versions of this: short axes, long axes. We wanted to see whether the length of the axes would influence the user's behavior during the alignment. This other interface here has the user position the controller at the indicated position and then shine a virtual flashlight onto the target plane. This approach fully decouples rotational guidance from translation guidance. And then this interface here ends up combining aspects of previous interfaces. So it has a high amount of visual redundancy with a lot of geometric patterns and colors to align. And we ended up testing two variants of this particular interface. So one of the variants, that target plane, is always at a fixed pose relative to the desired alignment pose. So it can appear below or above the user's field of view. In another variant, we dynamically adjust it so that we rotate that plane so it always appears at head level, so the user doesn't have to tilt the head up or down. So with each of these interfaces, we also ended up testing this optional radius bubble visualization. So this has a growing and shrinking sphere to help indicate the translational alignment. So this adds additional redundancy, additional visual clutter, but it helps give additional cues to the user about whether the translation accuracy is good. So after we implemented these interfaces, we ended up running a user study. We had 23 first-time users of our interface, as the participants. Each of them performed a series of mid-air alignments using each of the interfaces. And for each of the interface permutations we tested, they were given a randomized sequence of 12 mid-air poses to prevent memorization. They moved the controller to each indicated pose. They pulled the controller trigger to confirm the alignment. The participants were encouraged to move the arms, move the head, walk around, modify the body pose in whatever way felt appropriate and natural to them. So here's all 10 of the interfaces that we ended up having. We structured the study as a two-way repeated measures ANOVA. We compared interface versus radius bubble. So we had 5 different kinds of interfaces, those 5 columns that you see here, and then we had 2 levels, or 2 rows, either without the radius bubble or with the radius bubble. So overall, we found that the axis interfaces led to reduced alignment time and reduced translational error. But on the other hand, the interfaces where the user had to align with a faraway target had lower rotational error. Now, these interfaces have a higher visual sensitivity to rotational error. It has both pros and cons. It allows for more fine-tuning, but it also reveals that natural shakiness of the user's arm, which leads some participants to say they have lower confidence in their alignment performance. Now, one of the interface variants that we tested was the XYZ axis. We had short axes, long axes, and we measured the horizontal distance between the user's head and the user's hand during alignment. We found that there's a statistically significant difference where the longer the axes, the further out the user held the arm. So the users were trying to keep all of the visualizations simultaneously within the headset's field of view, rather than moving the head back and forth to see all parts of the visualization. With some of the interfaces that we tested, the translation guidance and the rotation guidance were separated from each other. This ended up revealing something pretty interesting. Now, we knew from prior work that users would inherently decouple this alignment task into a translation task and a rotation task, but typically will switch back and forth of adjusting the translation, then adjusting the rotation, back and forth, back and forth. So we initially expected that the user would look back and forth between the translation guidance and the rotation guidance, rotating the head. But instead, what we got was really different. A lot of our users would align themselves so that both translation guidance and rotation guidance were simultaneously visible within the field of view of the headset. The users would sometimes lean, bend down. A few of them would even kneel down on the floor in order to line themselves up. So there's a few possible reasons for this. The users might have been concerned about losing the visuals if they went out of the field of view, or the weight of the headset could make it uncomfortable to move the head back and forth. There's also some visual artifacts that can happen with these headsets when you rotate your head, like color separation. So that could also be a factor. So what are the main takeaway messages from all this? So it's good to have some redundant visual elements when you're indicating the translation and rotation alignment. But if you have too many of them, then that redundancy will cause cognitive overload. So we saw that with some of the interfaces where we had multiple radius bubbles, and this ended up being overwhelming to some of the participants. So you have to balance it. And when it comes to alignment strategy, users will prefer the interfaces that show both rotation guidance and translation guidance together, rather than trying to decouple them. Even though the users will refine that alignment by going back and forth between translation and rotation, the interface should let the user decide when and how to switch between those two tasks. And then, perhaps most importantly, we find that the users will inherently position themselves so that visual sensitivity is maximized during the alignment process. So that means the interface designers should try to adjust the visualizations so that all the visual elements can be viewed from a comfortable and ergonomic body pose. So to conclude, mid-air alignment of handheld objects is important for a lot of tasks. AR headsets can help guide users, and in this work, we've shown several interfaces and design requirements. We did a user study to reveal how these visualizations will affect task performance, and also how users will end up orienting their own bodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for the nice presentation. So if you have any questions, please either use WOWA to ask your questions, or you can type in the chat here in the public chat, and you can also raise your hand, unmute yourself, and ask the question. Is there any questions from the audience now? Okay, perhaps I can start with the first question then. So I see that the user doesn't have to move as much as in the previous cases. So this means the user has to, move much less with respect to other cases. And I'm wondering if this improves the task performance of the users. Like, is it like, did you also have any application-oriented cases where you measure the task performance of people? Like, did they achieve tasks in a much shorter time? Or like, how are your insights on this question?
Yeah, well, I mean, the aspect of task performance is that the alignment process itself is the task. So a lot of the use case that we were thinking of was mostly in the idea of guided 3D scanning. So if you're needing to take some kind of camera or some kind of sensor and place it somewhere in midair, the idea is that your performance on that task is going to be dependent to some degree on your ability to place it there. And if you have some sort of guidance system that tells you where to place it, the ability of the user to follow automated systems instructions would be important. Specifically for this research, we decoupled it from the task itself. So we were looking just at the question of if we're just trying to think about the 6-off alignment problem in midair on its own, absent of the actual use case itself, then then this is kind of what our focus is. So additional, future work would be to say, like, okay, well, if we had some kind of guidance system for 3D acquisition, for example, and the user deviated from the instructions by so many centimeters or so many degrees, how much does that actually impact? And that's not something that we address in the work.
I see. Also, we have another question from Steve finer. And he asked about, have you thought about approaches that use two hands or controllers in concert rather than just one?
That's a really good question. We didn't consider it for this, mostly because in our case, if we're thinking mostly about camera alignment, that tends to be something for just a single hand. But there are some interesting things, like for example, if maybe you needed to hold up a banner or a flag or something like that, something that required two hands to do, and for whatever reason it was important that you placed your hands into particular poses. Maybe you're practicing semaphore or something like that. That would make sense, and then that would be an interesting use case because you would need to find ways of placing the visualization of this guidance somewhere kind of in between, because the user is not going to be looking back and forth between their hands. We already saw that the user doesn't like to move around the head very much. So you would have to have something probably like a third person perspective that the user is trying to follow. That would be kind of my guess about it.
I see. I see Steve is typing. He says the hands could be close. That's his comment.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like if you have them where they're close, then yeah, you could just have essentially perhaps something like models of hands or two XYZ axes in midair that you're trying to align. There might be some interesting aspects where you're trying to differentiate one from the other. You could use like color coding, for example. But yeah, I think it's an interesting area for future research.
Yeah, also something to discuss maybe after this session. Again, Steve comments about many photographers hold their camera with two hands. Maybe that's a question we can have post this session. Thank you, Dan, for your nice presentation. We will now move on with the next presentation. And our next presenter is Zhang Yan. Super wide view optical see-through head-mounted display with per pixel occlusion capability. Zhang, stage is yours.
Hello everyone, I'm Yan Zhang, PhD student from Nara Institute of Science and Technology. I'm very glad to give the presentation today. My topic is super wide view optical see-through head-mounted displays with per pixel occlusion capability. The goal selecting is a well-known issue in augmented reality system. If you have used the optical see-through discs such as HoloLens 2 to render an opaque object on the real background, you may notice that the object goes to be semi-transparent, which shows no visibility and reduces the realism of AR display. One of the methods to address this issue is image forming occlusion, which is also known as hard edge occlusion. This method uses a four-lens system to generate an intermediate image at a shared focal plane of the two lenses. The spatial light modulator, S10, can be put at this plane to render occlusion for each incident beam. In general, the advantage of this method is a sharp occlusion mask, but the advantage is a narrow field of view. And another method is direct occlusion that only uses SMs to render the occlusion. In general, this method can provide a wider field of view, while it can only render a broad occlusion mask. As we know, the full field of view of our human beings, which is shown on the left, is 220 degrees times 120 degrees. However, both of the two methods fail to render a sharp occlusion mask within such a wider field of view. As for image forming occlusion, it works very well for the image right front of the system. While when the beam comes from a wider field of view, it will be focused in a curved focal plane that the planar SM cannot render occlusion, cannot render sharp occlusion for each pixel. The direct occlusion, at first, it only provides limited occlusion capable pixels, and if we want to further expand the field of view, we need to push the SM closer so that the overlapping of different beams will further reduce the occlusion precision. So we introduced a hybrid method to render the sharp occlusion within a super wide field of view, and our approach can achieve the theoretical occlusion capable field of view of 180 degrees times 145 degrees. We built the prototype to demonstrate the field of view of 122 degree times 74 degree. Our approach is based on double episode mirror structure. This structure uses the episode mirror to provide a super high numerical aperture, which ensures wide field of view of with low distortion. And we further put a pinhole mask at the shallow focus that we can achieve slim propagation beams, and with the S10 in front of the entrance pupil, we can render sharp occlusion. Unfortunately, this basic structure only provides the dark and broad display images, so that we have to do some improvement with this basic structure. So the first step, we analyze the imaging property of the episode mirror, which is shown on the left. Different beams will be focused by the episode mirror into the 3D space from Q1 to Q3, and only these chip rays can pass through the pinhole at the shared focus F2. In details, the focusing plane height of these points varies with different incident angle and also varies with different object distance. Here, the object distance is given from 0 millimeter to 100 millimeter. So that we design the improvement structure to enhance the image brightness. The goal of this structure is to not only allow the tube ray to pass through the system, but also allow other parts of the beam to reach on the retina. And we achieve this with the lens pair consists of the concave lens and the convex lens. To determine the configuration of the lens pair, we derive the ray transfer matrix, which is shown on the left button, and we further simplify the equations by setting Fy, which is the focal length of the concave lens, equal to minus Fx, which is the focal length of the convex lens. And we solve the equations with the strict condition that the rays perfectly recovered by the lens pair, so that we can have the following solution indicate that only chip rays can be recovered perfectly at the point Q2 by setting the foci of the concave lens and the convex lens at F2 and F3 respectively. For these rays that used to enhance the image brightness, they can only satisfy the condition of x2 equal to minus x1, so that we can have the relationship between the lens interval D and the position of the image point L1. And this equation indicates that the lens interval D determines the focus of Fy along the vertical direction. Our prototype is made by adding an SLM in front of the entrance pupil of the system, and we also put a corner LCD and a beam splitter to project the virtual image into the system. The photo of our prototype is given by the right, and notice that there is a vertical parallax between the entrance pupil hair and the extra pupil hair. We have conducted some experiments with our prototype. The first experiment is done by changing the pinhole aperture from 1 millimeter to 10 millimeter, and this video shows that image resolution drops with pinhole aperture increasing. The camera that we used to record this video has the field of view of 90 degree times 50 degree. We also changed the lens interval from 12 millimeter to 15.5 millimeter. The video shows that the focus position dips upward with the lens interval increase. And we have fixed the pinhole aperture at 1 millimeter while changing the camera focus from 65 millimeter to infinity. Images captured without the prototype is strongly influenced by the camera focus variation, while images captured with the prototype are almost a lot influenced by the different camera focus. To display a non-distorted virtual image, we develop a simple algorithm that transforms target image into the display format, and the display image is given by the LCD into the system. As a result, we can display the virtual image within a field of view of 160 degree times 74 degree. Notice that the huge distortion in this observed image is caused by the camera that we use to record such wide field of view. It's a fisheye camera, and our prototype itself only introduced a small distortion. We also record the field of view increases by expanding the pinhole aperture, which is shown on this video. And as the final experiment, we have done the demonstration of occlusion capability with different pinhole aperture from 1 millimeter, 3 millimeter to 5 millimeter. In general, all the three configurations render occlusion mask well. In details, the configuration with pinhole aperture of 1 millimeter shows the best of occlusion performance. The image with the occlusion is much more visible than the image without the occlusion with the 1 millimeter pinhole aperture. What is more, the resolution of occlusion mask drops with the pinhole aperture expanding, while the image brightness increases with the pinhole aperture increasing. As a summary, we have done the contributions include we proposed an approach to render sharp occlusion among a wide field of view. We also designed an optimized structure for improving image quality, and we further built a digital prototype that demonstrates purposeful occlusion in a super wide field of view. Limitations include small eye box, viewpoint shift, large form factor, broad display image, and suboptimal occlusion performance still need to be addressed in the future. Thank you for listening.
So we now have time to ask questions to Zhang, and you can ask your question either raising your hand and unmuting yourself and talking through your microphone, or you can use OA, or you can use the chat window again to ask a question. Please use the public chat in this case. Is there any questions from the audience? Perhaps I can start with the first one. I see, Zhang, that the optical layout that you're providing in this work, it has a long optical path, and does it cause to change the perspective of the person wearing this headset? Meaning, like, do the people observe things from a slightly different point in space when they wear this headset?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, of course, the perspective, the viewpoint of the user is changed with the let me say the vertical parallax between the entering pupil and the exit pupil, and I think it's of course one of the main drawbacks of our system, and we did think about some solutions to solve this issue. So one of them may simply reduce the system form factor by using the epsilon mirror with shorter focal length, or by using the smaller the lens. We may downsize the system, and we thereby have the smaller vertical parallax. But with this method, we cannot eliminate the viewpoint shift of the user. So now we are working on designing a loop structure that can eliminate the viewpoint shift entirely. So we in the first step, we plan to add an extra lens pair into this system before the second ellipsoid mirror, that we can a kind of expanding the light path. Then we can guide the light upward, so that before the light enter the second ellipsoid mirror. And by using such kind of design, we guess we can place the entrance pupil and the exit pupil at the same horizontal plane that we can provide the appropriate viewpoint to our users.
Thank you for your answer. Before we move on to the next question, I would like to highlight to our technical team. Like some people claim that on YouTube stream they don't hear any sound, so there must be a way to fix that. I'm moving on to the next question from the crowd. Yuta Ito asks, do the inserted lenses cause scene distortion in addition to viewpoint shift?
Sorry, could you please explain to more details?
So when you add additional lenses to your optical system, does it cause any geometrical distortion of the world view? Meaning like the world you see through the system, through your headset, is not really equivalent in terms of distortions with what you see with bare eyes. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, of course. If you input any lenses into an optical system, it will introduce more distortion, more aberration. But well, we only use a pair of the lenses, and if you notice our system, the light that reflected by the first epsilon mirror will be restrict in a cone, and the incident angle of this light is to the following lens pair is much smaller than the original angle. So in this case, we can reduce that the aberration or the distortion that are caused by the extra lenses. But of course, if we want to add more lenses into our system, the distortion will increase, and we may need to design some relay component to keep our image quality still be acceptable.
Thank you for your answer. We will now move on to the next presenter. Thank you very much for your presentation, Zhang. One more time, applause for Zhang's presentation. And the next presentation is from Jin Jing. Presentation is titled as Towards Eyeglass Style Holographic Near Eye Displays with Statically Expanded Eye Box. Jin, the stage is yours.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Xingqing Xia from Shanghai University. I'm very happy to present our novel research work on near display technology at this virtual ISMA conference. The topic of my presentation is Towards Eyeglasses Style Holographic near displays with statically expanded eyeballs. This work was implemented in Shanghai University, China, and Big Data Center, Singapore, with close collaborations by researchers from SAU, SIT, NTU, and UNC. This is the outline of my presentation. After a brief background introduction on different kinds of near displays, I will present our novel holographic near display system design and the method to achieve statically expanded eyeballs. Based on this design, we developed and fabricated the laser ray-based HOE to expand the eyeball statically. We built a near display prototype for experiment test. The result confirmed that the proposed design can expand the eyeballs up to 10 mm without any moving parts. Finally, I will summarize my presentation. Near display is a critical key component for both VR and AR technologies, which can provide the user eye, VR, and AR images. For AR near displays, different methods are proposed to observe both virtual and real images, such as the simple combiner, free-form TIR prism, and waveguide. But all of these near displays, including most of the current commercial products, are based on the biocular parallax method. It means that each eye could only observe one 2D image, not similar to people to watch the real world. The accommodation depth does not match the vergence depth in this case. So long-term wearing may cause the visual fatigue for the user. To solve the avoidance accommodation conflict, many methods were proposed, such as the live view, mass-value view, multifocal, varifocal, and holographics. All of these methods have their own drawbacks or trade-off in principle. Live view, including multi-view and integral imaging near displays, always have poor resolution due to the trade-off between spatial and angular resolution. Mass-value view near display, similar to pinhole mode, has no focus and small eyeballs, which can only alleviate but not solve the VAC issue. Multifocal near display always need high-speed display devices to scan multiple slices. Varifocal near displays provide a single focal plane which can be adjusted based on the requirement, but it also suffers from the limited FOV. Holographic is an ideal approach of displaying 3D scenes, since it reconstructs the light wavefront of the scenes, including both amplitude and phase, so it can solve the VAC issue in principle. There are various reported research work which try to integrate the holography into near display. Most of the researchers are based on the on-S design of the holographic display. It always have a buggy form factor due to the complicated optics. In 2017, the researchers from Microsoft Research proposed a holographic near display with the eyeglasses-like form factor and achieved the FOV of 80 degrees in horizontal. Fundamentally, there is a trade-off between the FOV and the eyeballs in optics. When the FOV is 80 degrees in horizontal, the corresponding eyeballs is very teeny, which is around 1 millimeter. Anyway, holography is perhaps the only method demonstrated so far that can achieve both wide FOV and a compact eyeglasses style form factor for AR near displays. How to achieve both wide FOV and large eyeballs is a challenging work for holographic near displays. Our work presented in this ISMA paper is mainly focused on this important issue. The traditional design of the holographic near display always utilizes the lens function HOE, which is transparent and can reflect the off-S incident beam and converge to the eye pupil. So the eye could observe both virtual green apple and the real Rubik cubes. Here, the spot size of the focus on the pupil plane is the eyeball size, which is very small. Our novel design presents a novel HOE to replace the traditional lens HOE, including all the functions of the traditional lens HOE. This novel HOE can also create multiple focal points at the eye pupil plane. When the eye pupil locates at the each focal point, the display holographic image can be always observed. So with this lens-late HOE design, the eyeballs can be expanded without any moving part. Then I will introduce the details of this novel design. This figure shows the optical semantic of our design. Our new holographic near display consists of a laser light source, a collimator, a linear polarizer, a beam splitter, a phase SLM, a converging lens, a mirror, and a lens-late HOE. After the collimated beam illustrates the phase SLM through the reflection from the beam splitter. After modulation by the phase SLM, the light is reflected and projected off-S onto the lens-late HOE via lens 1 and mirror 2. Virtual imagery is then be reconstructed from the lens-late HOE and projected into the viewer's eye. While the viewer also sees the real-world scene through the lens-late HOE, it should be noted that the lens-late HOE is a crucial component for achieving expanded eyeballs. It not only reflects off-S rays at appropriate angles to the viewer eye, but also creates a focal point array around the viewer's eye to expand the eyeballs. As previous reported by Maimoni's work, it is possible to incorporate our design into compact eyeglasses style near display. This figure shows such a conceptual design for a compact holographic linear display. It consists of freeze SLM, fiber copper laser, lens-lit HOE, and 340 mirrors. In contrast to benchtop's design, the SLM here is illustrated directly by a divergent beam from the fiber copper laser rather than a collimated beam. To compress the form factor of the design, no additional conventional optical components are used except for the lens-lit HOE and mirrors. All the optical functions are integrated into the SLM and HOE. The lens-lit HOE is a key component for achieving expanded eyeballs. Our lens-lit HOE allows off-edge projection beams to generate multifocal points in the pupil plane, and thus extend the viewing range of the pupil without the need of any moving parts. Applying this concept, we designed a hologram recording setup to fabricate this HOE via interference, as shown in this figure. After beam expansion, the laser beam is collimated and divided into two beams by the beam splitter. The beam reflected by the beam splitter goes through the lens 1 and then reflected by mirror 2 to illustrate the hologram film as a reference beam, which is the same as the corresponding part of the proposed holographic linear display. The beam that traverses the beam splitter is a signal beam. It utilizes a lens array to create multifocal points and then imaging at the pupil plane by relay optics. The hologram film is close to the lens 3 to obtain large size of effective hologram region. We built a HOE fabrication setup on the optical bench and put a piece of hologram material on the HOE clamp in dark environment. The interference pattern between the signal beam and the reference beam is recorded on the hologram film by exposure for several minutes. The lens-lit HOE fabrication is completed after bleaching out with an ordinary light bulb. This size of the fabricated HOE is 50 mm by 38 mm. We put a whiteboard on the pupil plane with only reference beam illustration. The experimental result is shown on the bottom of figure 2. This is the holographic rendering pipeline of our linear display. For a given target image, we first compute the complex wave field on the target image plane and then propagate this wave field up to our lens-lit HOE combiner. Due to off-edge projection, geometric transformation of complex amplitude is implanted to get the complex amplitude. With the GS interactions, the final freeze pattern can be generated for the SLM. Following the benchtop design, we built the system setup on the optical bench. Here we use the hollow eye proto freeze-only SLM with 4 HD resolution as an image source, and put the industrial camera at the eye location to simulate the eye. In the experiment, we put some real object as a reference, such as the Rubik's Cube, banana, and orange. And the industrial camera is mounted on a XZ moving stage for the test of eyeballs expansion. We choose a virtual 3D apple with polygon mesh wireframe as a target image, located at 200 mm from the camera. The virtual apple is displayed on the top of real Rubik's Cube. To verify the eyeballs, a series of photos were taken by moving the camera both horizontally and vertically. We note that the virtual image can be viewed with similar image quality in the eyeball size 10 mm, both horizontal and vertically. Based on each eye location, we render the holographic images to ensure the virtual apple on the top of the real Rubik's Cube, and thus generated the motion parallels for the eye movement. And we measure the FOV, which is about 45 degrees in horizontal. We also compare the images captured with the conventional HOE and with our lens-lit HOE. It is obvious that our lens-lit HOE can significantly expand the eyeball size to 10 mm for the holographic linear display without the loss of resolution when compared to the conventional HOE. At last, I will summarize my presentation. A novel design of holographic near displays aimed at the eyeglasses style and the statically expanded eyeballs is demonstrated. We fabricate a lens-lit HOE combiner to expand the eyeballs statically using unlike holography, which can integrate multiple optical functions in a single thin transparent plate. We also utilize a digital holography to generate a face pattern for the S10, and thus display the target image for the eye. The experimental results successfully verify the statically expanding eyeballs of the proposed holographic near display up to 10 millimeter. In the future, we will continue this work on the holographic near displays and improve the image quality, FOV, and 3D depth Q, and develop the conceptual design into a practical eyeglasses style prototype. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ching, for the nice presentation. And we can now move on to the questions. Again, you can either unmute yourself, ask your question, or you can ask in the public chat. And I'm also checking for who Q&A session. So you have multiple options. Is there any questions from the audience? Okay, perhaps I can start with the first question. So my question is, in conventional microlenses, there's always the trade-off in between resolution and the size of each microlens. Does this also apply to your approach, or is it free from that? Can you also elaborate a little bit more about the resolution capabilities of your display with respect to conventional implementations?
Actually, for this design, the lens array is not for the integral imaging. It's for the HOE recording. The function of the lens array just utilized to create multiple focal point at the pupil plane. So it's no resolution related with the lens array. So because the image generated is from the spatial light modulator, all the resolution is based on the optics and the spatial modulator.
Got it. So there's also one other question from the public chat. It says, Kiyoshi Kiyokawa says, is it straightforward to develop a full color version?
Yes, that's my plan next year. Actually, the HOE recording for RGB color, that is very challenging work. It need to fabricate the RGB HOE in one single plate. That is challenging work from my current design. So all the optics and the optics design need to consider 3 wavelengths. So I think we can get some better result with the full color holographic near display.
I see that Ivan has this light bulb on his avatar. So does that mean he wants to ask a question, or am I maybe interpreting that? Okay. Maybe it's time for us to move on to the next presentation. Thank you, Xingjing, for your nice presentation. Let's have an applause one more time for Xingjing.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, our next presentation is from Connie Liu, and her presentation is titled as Improved Vergence and Accommodation via Purkinje Image Tracking with Multiple Cameras for Augmented Reality Glasses. Liu, the stage is yours.
Hello, I'm Connie Liu from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Today I'll be talking about our work, Improved Vergence and Accommodation Estimation by Purkinje Image Tracking for AR glasses. In recent years, we have seen eye tracking a growing force in many areas, especially in VR and AR, where the main goal is to track the gaze movement and position on a 2D plane or in a 3D space. Eye tracking enables new human-computer interaction techniques where the gaze-based interface is hands-free and more dynamic. It has also been leveraged as a marketing tool to understand user attention and habits. For people with disabilities, eye tracking helps them to communicate with other people as well as control devices. While current eye tracking methods provide promising results, they mainly focus on computing the gaze angle and ignore the accommodation depths. In augmented reality, without knowing the exact depths the user is looking at, the system can easily render virtual objects that misalign with real-world focus view. Also, estimating vergence and accommodation separately helps to solve the vergence accommodation conflict, where the vergence distance and the focus distance are mismatched. Our work is to accurately estimate both binocular vergence and monocular accommodation. Common camera-based wearable eye trackers estimate gaze by tracking the features in eyes, such as the limbus, pupil, and reflections from the eye. We call those reflections Purkinje images. With the rise of neural networks, many appearance-based methods attempt to build a large data set and feed directly the whole eye image into the neural network to infer the final gaze. In terms of depth estimation, an intuitive idea is to use vergence, based on the fact that two eyes go in opposite directions to foveate on objects at different depths. But as we discussed before, this approach cannot handle the vergence accommodation conflict. Gaze recasting methods measure the depths to the first object in the scene where the imaginary gaze vector intersects. These methods rely on 3D knowledge of the scene and fail to address occlusion ambiguity. On the other hand, accommodation-based methods leverage the anatomical changes in the eyes, such as lens curvature change during accommodation. The outer refractors are widely used and provide a good estimate of accommodation, but they are very bulky and impractical to be integrated into AR glasses. Similar to early attempts by Ito, our method tracks a specific reflection from the interior surface of the eye lens. But we also show that this specific reflection can improve the accuracy of gaze angle estimation, and we integrate our eye tracker into a compact eyeglasses style form factor. In the next few minutes, we will first analyze how higher order Purkinje images increase sensitivity of both gaze angle and accommodation depth estimation. Then we will describe how to design personalized eyeglasses with multiple cameras and LEDs for robust capture of Purkinje images. Finally, we propose a convolutional neural network-based method to track the Purkinje images fast and accurately. Accommodation is a mechanism by which the eye changes focus from far to near point and is produced by a change in lens shape. In other words, lens shape is an indicator of how far the eye is looking at. To capture the curvature change of lens, we shift our focus to the Purkinje images. Purkinje images are reflections from the anatomical structure of the eye. Specifically, the first and second Purkinje image are the reflections from the anterior and posterior surface of the cornea. The third and fourth Purkinje image are reflections from the anterior and posterior surface of the lens. Thus, tracking lens curvature could be translated into tracking movement of higher level Purkinje images. Since the curvature of anterior lens surface changes more than the posterior one, we only track the movement of the third Purkinje image. In the meanwhile, we also found that the third Purkinje image can surprisingly improve the gaze angle estimation. This image illustrates the position movement of pupil center and Purkinje images while eye rotates. The third Purkinje image moves in the opposite direction relative to others. Jointly considering the pupil center on the third Purkinje image enables more sensitive gaze angle tracking. In order to capture Purkinje images robustly within a certain range of field of view, we simulate the whole scenario in Blender to design a compact and personalized eye tracker. We first create an eye model with detailed eye structures, including the anterior and posterior cornea and lens. Current state-of-the-art eye rendering methods have not paid attention to the eye lens, which is yet essential in our work. We also introduced a head model with eyelashes, virtual camera, and LED models with the same parameters as those used in the real scenario. While optimizing the camera and LED position, we prevent occlusion of the vision, use fewer LEDs to avoid mutual interference between them, and fewer cameras to decrease both bandwidth and price. The right image here illustrates a comparison of third Purkinje image movement pattern in the real and simulated scenario. With the optimized configuration of cameras and LEDs, we design an eyeglasses frame that fits the user and 3D printed. Finally, our eye tracker is composed of 2 tiny cameras and 2 infrared LEDs for each eye. To track gaze with Purkinje images, we collect a big data set and design an end-to-end convolutional neural network. Our network takes images captured by different cameras and feeds them into a detector to generate heat maps of semantic features, namely the pupil, first and third Purkinje image. Then the original image and its corresponding heat maps are compared together as the input of the regressor. The final output of the regressor is the gaze position in 3D space. Next, we evaluate our proposed system on our multi-view dataset and provide qualitative and quantitative analysis on major components. Here we show 2 examples of semantic feature detection in the upper left. And we measure both the true positive and false positive detection rate, as well as the Euclidean distance between the estimated feature center and the ground truth. As shown in Table 1, our feature detection method is able to detect all features correctly when they indeed exist. No pupil or first Purkinje image are misdetected when they do not exist. We also evaluate the ground truth target position and estimated gaze position at the middle depths. We transfer the output 3D vector to 2D gaze angle and compute the angle error. Our eye tracker estimates gaze with an error of only about 0.37 on average. Moreover, we validate the effectiveness of the third Purkinje image in improving both gaze angle and accommodation estimation. We conduct ablation studies of different feature combinations to assess their effectiveness. Table 2 and Table 3 provide the binocular and monocular results of gaze angle and accommodation estimation, respectively. In all cases, the best estimation results come from finding all features. As a comparison, we also experiment with only using input images and detected PCCR features, namely the pupil and first Purkinje image, which achieves a better result than the baseline, but is worse than the one combining the third Purkinje image. We also found that binocular result is better than monocular one, which is reasonable considering the additional information another eye may provide compared to the monocular version. We also compare our results with state-of-the-art methods in terms of gaze angle estimation. Experiments demonstrate that our results outperform the state-of-the-art. As a conclusion, we demonstrate a comprehensive and cheap eye tracker for AR eyeglasses that tracks both binocular versions and a monocular accommodation robustly by tracking the high-level Purkinje images. We're excited to integrate our eye tracker into future AR displays to provide seamless and comfortable augmented reality experiences. However, our eye tracker still can be improved in several directions. First of all, due to COVID-19, we currently evaluate our eye tracker only on a single user with normal vision. In the future, we plan to extend it to a wide range of users, including those with refractive errors in the eyes. Secondly, considering the gap between simulated eye model and real one, we still need to manually fine-tune the eyeglasses configuration. In the future, we wish to completely eliminate manual effort. Finally, we also hope to mitigate the errors caused by eyeglasses slippage. More details, please refer to our paper. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lou, for the nice presentation. And we can now move on to the questions. And is there any questions from the audience? Perhaps I can start with the your tracker, your gaze tracker equipped with these cameras, are they able to capture Purkinje images for all the people, or is there some limitation in capturing Purkinje images when it comes to different people?
First, thank you for the question. And so that's actually a very important question here. So in our paper, we only like test on one specific user, but we also did some preliminary experiments on trying to use our method on different users. And we did so we asked several users to come to our lab beforehand, and we asked them to take one pair of eyeglasses and to try to capture the Purkinje images. And the good news is we're able to capture Purkinje images for almost for every user. And the users are like have different ages and different races. So the thing is, we haven't like tried to do eye tracking using this Purkinje images for now, but just like capturing the Purkinje images, we are confident that it definitely like the next step, the future plan for this project would be to make this eye tracker to work for general users. Yeah.
So I would like to ask a second question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I see that you have this network for the gaze tracker, a neural network, and I see that it's two stages, right? Like one of them is binding segmentation masks for your Purkinje images, and the other one is mapping that to the final gaze location, I suppose. In this case, can this be replaced with an end-to-end network? Like instead of two stages, can this be all done in one stage? Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, okay, sure. So I think the current neural network architecture is already an end-to-end architecture. It's like separate into two sections. The first one is to like use fast RCN to detect the features, and the second one is to like regress the 3D position of the eye. So do you mean like you want them to like just don't maybe combine, make them more consensually?
Yeah. So I was mainly asking about like this intermediate image that you generate where you have the masks for the Purkinje images. Instead of achieving that, you just feed in images from the video stream of your camera and then just getting the gaze locations as the output.
Okay, I see. So I think like one difficulty here is to so we separate them into two parts because we want to use ground truth data of the feature maps, of the Purkinje images, and to supervise this network. So if we remove that part, for example, we don't want the ground truth data, and I'm not pretty sure if we can, really capture the Purkinje images. So we can still like track the gaze and get the 3D position of the gaze, but maybe we don't exactly use the information from that Purkinje images.
Yeah, I understand this as like in order to take advantage from Purkinje images, you need that step because otherwise we don't know what the network is truly learning.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I don't see any other questions in the public chat or in the Q&A section of WOA, and I think we can move on to the next presentation. Thank you very much, Lou, for your nice presentation. And the next presentation is from Takumi Communicado, Stained View Variable Intensity Light Attenuation Display with Cascaded Spatial Color Filtering for improved color fidelity. Takumi, stage is yours.
In this paper, we present Stained View, a light attenuation optical see-through display with improved color fidelity. Existing have limited color fidelity and contrast. It leads to a degraded appearance of virtual images. Our Stained View achieves variable intensity and wide color gamut by employing cascaded spatial filters. As a result, we succeeded in rendering rich virtual images in a subtractive manner. Optical see-through HMD or AR glasses play an essential role in a variety of AR applications. These OSD displays provide virtual images by guiding the light from an internal microdisplay into the user's eye. These additive OSD displays inherit the color blending problem. As shown in the figures in the slide, the virtual images become semi-transparent by the background light from the real scene. Especially, low contrast virtual images are particularly prone to degradation. It also means that these displays are weak in bright environments, like outdoor. For these reasons, we are focusing on subtractive OSD displays. In the subtractive paradigm, a display presents virtual images by placing a programmable spatial color filter in front of the scene light. It's the same principle as stained glass. In our previous work, we proposed a light attenuation display. This system can display different spatial color filters using a special light modulator. As shown in the right figures, it can render colorful virtual objects in front of a white background without using any additional light source. Our previous system had two fundamental drawbacks in terms of image quality. The first problem is a narrow color gamut. Because our color filter has a wide peak in the spectral domain, it can show only limited colors among the color space. Also, it can form only 256 patterns of a filter at a frame. Therefore, it requires time multiplexing to represent intermediate colors. Secondly, the system cannot control the intensity and the color independently. Therefore, as shown in the right figures, it fails to represent the difference between dark tiles and bright tiles. So in this work, we tackled these two problems and implemented a improved light attenuation display. Here, I introduce the principle of the color filter using a phase-only spatial light modulator, or PSLM. This color filter is composed of a PSLM and two linear polarizers. First, the unpolarized incident light enters the P polarizer. Then, the light is distributed into S and P polarized components, and only P polarized light passes through it, like this. If this P polarized light directly enters the S polarizer, the incident light will be completely occluded. Whereas, when a PSLM is located between them, it changes the polarization state. In this case, the S-polarized component of the modified light can pass through the second polarizer. This process can be expressed by the Poring equation. The transmittance of this filter depends on the input value for PSLM and of the incident light. As a result, this optical system works as a programmable color filter. This figure shows how the spectral transmittance changes depending on the input value for PSLM. Numbers on the left side are the input values, and the x-axis of each graph is wavelength. You can see the wave patterns shift to the left side as the input value changes. The curved lines shows chromaticity of the output light against a uniform spectrum input light. As mentioned before, these color filters result in the narrow color gamut and limited color representation. This is our first problem to solve. Therefore, in this paper, we propose installing a second PSLM into the setup to expand the color gamut. Hereby, the transmittance is expressed by a product of the single version of color filter. It increases variation of color filter to the square of 256 and efficiently expands the color gamut under the same illumination environment. Our second problem to solve is the uncontrollable intensity. As a solution to this problem, we install an amplitude spatial light modulator to achieve variable intensity. We employed a dynamic micromirror device, or DMD, that has been used in projectors and recent surveys of occlusion-capable displays. This device is composed of many micromirrors and can control the diffractance ratio by flipping mirrors very fast. By introducing a DMD, the intensity of incoming light can be controlled spatially. This is a prototype we built. The input light is reflected on the DMD, first color filter, mirror, and second color filter in order, while its intensity and chromaticity are modified, and then reached to user's eye. We also implemented a simulator of the setup, considering a calculation of PSLMs, a transmittance of each optical component, and the second direction between the PSLMs. This diagram shows the color of output light with a white input light. In this figure, the black dots show a single PSLM setup, which is the existing light attenuation display. And the yellow dots shows a proposed dual PSLM setup. From this result of simulation, we confirmed that the dual PSLM setup effectively extends the color gamut, and it fulfills 76% of its RGB color states. After the simulation, we measure the spectral transmittance of the prototype with a different white input light. The result of simulation and observation were roughly consistent, as shown in the figures. We also performed a visual evaluation. This experiment was held in my rental apartment due to COVID-19. We rendered a virtual Macbeth chart in front of a white background. This image was rendered by the previous method, as color and intensity representations are not accurate enough. The next is the image with amplitude modulation by DMD. We can see that the image quality has improved, especially the gradation of the bottom row. The third image was rendered with a dual PSLM setup. Due to the wider color gamut, this setup can represent all colors at one frame without time multiplexing. It also presents yellow and orange cells successfully. At the end, I will pick up some major limitations and prospects from the discussion part of our paper. Firstly, the transmittance of real seen light is low in the current prototype. Our simulation shows that it is only 0.7 to 11.6%. Secondly, our color simulations and calculations are still not perfectly consistent with actual observation. We are suspecting some factors, for example, a drift in PSLM property depending on temperature. Thirdly, although we demonstrated rendering on a white background, we have not demonstrated rendering on arbitrary backgrounds. To implement it, we need an additional observation camera in the setup and a filter selection algorithm. Here is the conclusion. Thank you for listening.
So thank you, Takumi, for your nice presentation. Now we can have some questions from the audience. Are there any questions from the audience? Perhaps I can start with the first question, Takumi. I see that this display can help you generate at least a block, a wider range of color gamut. But in different illumination cases, like for example, indoor illumination and outdoor illumination, the wavelength of light that you can find in these illumination vary quite a lot. I was wondering if you need all these capabilities for indoor environments. Did you look into spectrum of lights at indoors and see if your display is an overkill or if it's maybe nicely matching with the spectrum of those light sources?
Thank you for your question. First place, our system needs the accurate spectral distribution of the background scene at frame accuracy, pixel accuracy. So we have to design the color filter for each pixels depending on the color background of that pixel. So not related to indoor or outdoor, we have to introduce additional multi-spectrum camera to design an appropriate color filter in your situation. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand. So you're saying that if we have the right set of color filters tuned for each one of these illumination conditions with different wavelengths, then that matters rather than what your display can modulate, because that's the dominating factor in what you can show to the end at the end of the day to the user.
どういう意味ですか?
Okay, so are there any other questions from the audience? Okay, perhaps I can ask one more question. To decrease the form factor of your display, what else can be done?
Sorry, I couldn't follow you. Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, sure, I can, of course. To decrease the form factor, the volume of your display, to shrink it to a smaller size, what can be done in that respect?
I got it. It's a good question. The main cause of our bulky setup is two polarization beam splitters. These beam splitters are required to compose a color filter and to use the selective type of elements and DMD. So a possible solution to the bulky setup is using transparent type of spatial light modulators. In the case of transparent type of spatial modulator, we don't require polarized beam splitters, so we can decrease the space of them. And another solution is using a pancake spatial light modulator, which combines PSLMs and the second PSLM and the occlusion layer. It might be a possible solution for our bulky setup.
So we have one final question from Sang Yang on Hoa, and he's saying, very impressive work. As I know, the transmittance of the polarization optical components may vary with different wavelength. Do the variation bring any difficulties in your experiment?
I couldn't follow the details. The question was.
So I think, as far as I understand, the transmittance of different components in your system, with respect to different wavelengths, they can vary from each other, like although they are the identical components. And does that bring any difficulty in your experiment? Meaning, like, for example, do you have to calibrate your phase-only SLMs before actually making this implementation?
We actually calibrated the transmittance of each optical components and simulated them. The difficulty due to them was totally these optical components pass through the reddish well, so our final view got become a reddish a little. That was a difficulty depending on the properties of optical components.
Thank you. And this concludes our session. Please have a round of applause for all our authors: Dan Anderson, Zhang Yang, Xing Zia, Lu Koni, and Takumi Comunicado. Thank you. Hopefully this went well for you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Gun.
Yeah, well, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
Good job.
Yeah,
We're
thank you.
finishing the third day of ISMAR. Thanks a lot for your attention. Enjoy the campus, do some networking, discuss with others. We come back tomorrow with one great day. See you. Bye-bye.
Hi, Henry.
Hi, Henry.
Hi, sorry, I'm his student using his account. He's away. Yeah. Nice seeing you guys here.
So you're fake,
Okay.
Henry, folks.
Tell him Peter
Yeah.
said hi.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I said, yeah, I'm fake. All right, I'll go now.
But you really look like Henry,
Yeah.
folks, with this.
Of course, I'm bold. Yeah. Bye.
I see you. So, Yuta, do you see?
Okay.
Did you just see what happened?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Ivan. So did you
fine.
just see what happened?
Very good job in terms of
Thank you.
sharing the session. It's much
Thank
better than what
you.
I
Welcome to the iLearn Virtual Campus. Please sign up for a free iLearn membership on our website. Check out our 7th annual conference coming next spring 2021, and let us know if you're interested in hosting events or leasing space on our campus by emailing campus@immersivelrn.org.